So now we have a report from our strategic planning team, Discerning Currents, and Reverend Dr. Elizabeth Cunningham, and Eric Geberdeli are going to present for us. Reverend Eric. Eric.
So I'm Elizabeth, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Discerning Currents team, of which our chair, Larry, can't be here today because of illness, and all the other members are online. So that is why I'm here by default. And so I will be doing Larry's wonderful presentation as best I can with the help of Eric. So we're going to sort of tag team this presentation. So we're looking at our slides. So next slide. So this process, as some of you might remember, began back in March of 2023 when the Assembly of Elders established the Strategic Plan Task Group. And we named ourselves Discerning Currents, as currents in a river. We met in May and June and August. It's been ongoing work for several months, and it has been so much fun, and we have had a great time doing this report. And I have to say as well, meeting a lot of you in person when we did the in-person workshops in the spring, as well as online. We have been blessed by your participation, your energy, your spirit, your questions, your concerns. And we hope that as the writing team that we were able to dovetail as much as we could into this document that you've had. And it's been an honor to work with all of you to produce this.
So you may recall that we began in our conversations back in May around a fish icon, this beautiful image of a fish that actually has many different parts, just like the body of Christ that has many parts. And the fish was essentially categories of work that we all agreed we felt we needed to be attentive to. And those categories of work, in many cases, were overlapping. Right? So, for example, something that actually helps growth might also help if you do it in the leadership category, or it might also be of the common good of the whole church, or it's hard to kind of shoehorn exactly where some of these tasks fall into. But the idea here is that we have identified these key areas: growth, which includes the renewal of communities of faith, the creation of communities of faith, and speaking to the broader public and inviting them into the church. The second piece was around justice and climate, though those two pieces were kind of on the edges, if you recall, of the fish, those little gills that the fish had. Leadership was kind of at the heart. How do we build leadership for the future? Indigenous pathways, largely around the remit, which you've heard about. Hopefully you will hear about until you vote, because that is the key piece. And the church's common good. So when we refer to common good here, we're talking about how do we do things within the church that are going to be for its best interest and its effectiveness overall.
Yeah, format of the plan. In the document, in each section of the fish, there's a summary of what we heard you say. And that was a delight to write. It was sort of just, just putting it all together into a very invitational style of writing that hopefully you'll find your voice in those comments. We have also identified a number of priorities, and with each priority, there is anywhere from one to a number of activity streams. And in each of those activity streams, there are measurables and outputs, as well as some budget implications, which we have also considered. And it's not fully fleshed out. This is descriptive, not prescriptive. it's a work in progress, right? It keeps going on, and this is for a 2-year period, right? So it will keep evolving into what it's meant to be, right?
And in light of that, I'd just like to add too that there is a governance role for the regional council and its assembly of elders going forward, but there is also an implementation role for the staff and for lead volunteers. And so that's a key piece that once this is approved, we need to sort of make sure we work on after that. So there are 12 priorities and 16 streams. Always difficult to try to balance the kinds of things people want to do and what's reasonable for us to accomplish. And so when you look at this, it's not quite as simple as saying, oh, they've caught everything we've said and they've put it into a document and they're going to do everything. We couldn't do that. It's just not possible. So what we've done is we've selected some priorities to be able to go forward. And some of them are big and ambitious, and some of them are very technical and small. So it's not like when you look at 16 streams that you suddenly go, oh my goodness, how is that even possible? Because some of them are specific time-limited projects, and others are a lot more time-consuming. Some may also not happen because there isn't the interest or the involvement or the desire to be involved in those things. That may happen. So what we're prepared for is the possibility that something we decided we'd like to do doesn't happen because the resources, human resources, don't align to that, right? There is not enough of, the spirit isn't moving enough to make those things move. The other thing is that some are very technical and some are adaptive, which means that as we learn, we may have to shift and evolve. But always the challenge will be finding people to lead. And that will pay attention to that question because that's one of the key questions we'll be asking at the end of the presentation.
Okay. The first part of the fish, the growth. One of the priorities is toolkits to help communities of faith do a number of prescribed things. There is the Community of Faith self-assessment tool, the collaborative shared new ministries resources, as well as information around amalgamation and disbanding resources. Each one of these is filled with a lot of details of how you might imagine this work to happen. And so I invite you to look at the document and to look through all the wealth of details that could be part of it, might not be part of it. Each one has measurables. We arbitrarily decided in our midst what seemed like a reasonable timeline to get some of this work done. So these are all estimates that you will see in the document, but they're reasonable estimates, yeah, hopeful estimates. The second growth priority, other than the toolkits, was around something that was asked by many of you for alternative worship resources. There's an example of more of a technical one where it just means getting our resources together and putting it up on our website for access. Okay.
I'll just point. That'll work. One of the other things we realized is that the regional council really needs to sort of take a look at the justice priority and be able to identify a number of the areas that we're working on and activate them. And so it means that what we're looking at is a focus period, a feature period, for each justice initiative that would we would do over each quarter of the year. So over 3 months, we would really put a particular emphasis on a particular issue, provide people with things like worship resources or other kind of engagement possibilities that would help to drive each of the different social justice initiatives of the church.
Oh, the media. Yeah. The media strategy, this is a really important one that sort of was put into the document right at the tail end. This is a very important one with budget support to provide training for time-sensitive situations of injustice so that people know how to respond in a timely, professional manner, and it helps to get the professional support to help us learn how to do those things.
On the climate side, there are programs obviously that the United Church counts on, Faithful Footprints and Greening Sacred Spaces. So what we're trying to do is to drive a certain number of congregations to be involved with those programs. And so we've set a number and a target for how many we would like to get participating in those programs. And we have the young adult climate motivators within our region that we're hoping to engage in that process as well.
And the carbon footprint priority, so it's to find strategies around determining what our carbon footprint is, even for things like our meetings here, to be able to measure that in some way, to look for a reduction in terms of carpooling, and again, the young adult climate motivators being part of that.
And then we move to a climate forum. So we realize that of the number of the justice issues that we've got, having a climate forum would be a very useful piece of the puzzle so that we can then really drive these issues in practical and in advocacy ways. This is a priority stream that obviously is one of those that's dependent on whether or not there's enough interest in people participating in that.
And now we go to the leadership part of the FISH. This was loud and clear in our conversations with you over the in-person and online events, how to get our connections back together in terms of seeing each other and speaking with each other and finding each other even. First priority here is a lay mentoring network where we will connect lay leaders for the purpose of support, resourcing, and growing. It's really just to get back together again in any way that we can imagine to make that happen.
The other piece is around an association of ministers. As you'll see, this is something that was committed to back in the fall of 2019, had a little bit of a COVID hiccup, as you can imagine. And there is, in fact, another region in the country that's already has started an association of ministers. So seeing how we can build links to that and be able to be inspired by what they've already learned along the process is key here. So that's what will be happening now.
Yeah. We're almost done. We're almost done. The governance resources, this is a huge piece. To have toolkits, to give congregations, communities of faith, examples of models that might better meet your needs, your energy, your resources that you have in your own individual communities of faith. Along with that is an M&P refresher, because again, with the different governance models you may have, there may be shifts in terms of who's doing what, and that has implications and new learning for M&P who are maybe monitoring some of these challenges. I was going to say structures. Yeah, challenges is good. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. The Indigenous Pathways, as we mentioned earlier, this is the key area around voting on the remit. We have teams calling, volunteers calling through every single community of faith and pastoral charge to make sure that nobody gets forgotten in the process. And so we'll continue to do that. And of course, the justice piece ties into this. And so a lot of the Indigenous justice questions will be appearing in the justice section of this work plan.
And the last part of the FISH is the common good priority. We have the Healthy Connections Forum. This is an ability to make those connections between each of us, not just here in a plenary session, but in the rest of the months, right, when we're just doing our own thing in our congregations. It's an intentional effort to make connections. We've called a soft liaison, not a professional liaison from Covenant Support, but someone who is a connector in some way. Covenant renewal is a part of this that we're picking up. This is a piece that got lost with the when we moved to the three governance model of the United Church, and it's a way to remember the relationships that we covenant between ourselves, our communities, our ministry personnel, and with the region.
And finally, we're looking at how do we create centers of excellence. It's obvious that at a congregational level, the focus is obviously on the congregation that you have. The regional council can offer a perspective a little wider than that, with the hopes that what we can do is allow our communities of faith to not feel that they have to do everything, but instead take a look at how communities of faith that might be in a particular area might, for example, be leadership in contemplative worship, might offer midweek worship separately, might offer a particular type of Christian education or music ministry or children's ministry, but find centers of excellence for those so that not every single one of our communities of faith has to try to do everything perfectly, because it is an unreasonable expectation for us to have. And that really is about celebrating and growing strengths, so that if we find that there's a community of faith that doesn't have a strength in a particular area, but really wants to develop it, that we work with them to develop that strength, and that we try to find the ways where we can map out the entire region and know where our strengths are and encourage people from outside of our churches to be drawn by the buffet of options that we can offer them to satisfy their spiritual hunger.
I like that. Did you hear that? Buffet of options for our spiritual hunger? But what is important too is it's that collaborative piece and getting out of the silo part, but it's the collaborative. Yeah.
And so I guess the next thing is about sort of what we do next. So a motion will come before you now for debate and for discussion. If this motion is approved, the next steps would be for the staff team and volunteer leadership to take a look at the individual pieces and to flesh out a very specific plan on how to move forward. And then we are going to mobilize all of the resources around the priorities that we've set. And I just want to say that one of the conditions to that is that there may be things that aren't here that are no longer a priority that we also need to back away from. And we may need to be saying no to some things because we need to make room for the things that we are prioritizing. The other thing is that you'll be seeing after our report and after voting on this motion that the finance and budget statements incorporate what is being proposed here. So if for whatever reason there are changes here, we have time to make changes to the budget before we approve it. So that is the goal here.